안녕하세요, 리얼개미입니다. 오늘은 마크유스코의 부자가 될 수 있는 방법에 대한 인터뷰 영상을 가져왔습니다. 유익한 내용이니 재밌게 시청하시고 부자 되시기 바랍니다.
I do have concerns that we're on our way to a recession, right? Because you've seen the GDP now collapse from 4% to minus 2.8. So arguably we're going to have a little, ugly setback in growth. Ultimately, I think we're in a place where the response is going to be massively good for Bitcoin. Right? We're going to have to cut rates. We're going to have to increase the money supply back to high single digits, maybe even low double digits. And in that world, one Bitcoin's one Bitcoin, but we don't price in Bitcoin, price in dollars. So the price is going to go up. I'm 61. I'm the second to last year of the boomers. My wife's 60. She just turned 61 too. I'm about to turn 62. But we're the last 2 years of the boomers, and we still got, a decade before we can take our entitlements. So you got at least another 10 years where you got to prop up that generation because all of our wealth, the boomers, is in real estate and stocks. So you can't let those two things go down. And so even if there's a short-term flush, I think there will be. Economic data are pointing to it. Leading economic indicators are pointing to it. So all that said, I think it will be short-lived because I think the response from the U.S. government and mostly from China. China is firing the liquidity bazooka like we've never seen because they can't afford to have what happened to Japan happen to them. Because Japan, remember, in the 70s and 80s was the economic miracle. They were going to take over the world. We would send our people over to study under Japanese companies. And then they had a deflationary debt collapse and they've been, moribund for 30 years. China can't afford that because they got too many people. So they are printing capital and they're in a different position. They have more reserves. They have the largest reserves in the world, over $3 trillion. And so they have the economic power to recapitalize their banks, to, sweep the bad real estate stuff under the rug. And I'm sure you've seen the videos, right? Or if maybe even been. If you go to China, it's unbelievable. It's like living in the future. I mean, it's absolutely stunning what they have achieved. And I love the pictures where it shows, Shenzhen 30 years ago and Shenzhen today. It's like, my God, it was a field. And now it's this metropolis like right out of a science fiction movie. Macro can be summed up in a simple word, two simple words, money supply. Right? Why we're talking about all this other stuff, right? Why Bitcoin's so great. The money supply has been growing at a truly astonishing rate for a very long time. And it's because of, my generation, the boomers. The boomers create a bunch of entitlements. What's an entitlement? It's a promise you make to yourself that you don't fund, that you ask your kids to pay for. Who wouldn't vote for that? So the boomers voted for all these entitlements. And turns out the only way to get them was to issue lots and lots of debt. So we have this massive debt overhang, 36 trillion and rising. And then there's that T word again. So what does all that mean? Well, what that means is in order to service the debt, right, in order to create GDP when you have so much leverage, you have to increase the circulation of money. So money supply has grown about 8% since the creation of the Fed. And all this boils down to the difference between real money, right? Money that doesn't devalue, and devaluing paper currencies, fiat currencies. So from 1776 to 1913, a dollar was worth a dollar. There's a little fluctuation in value around wars and depressions, but a dollar was worth a dollar. There was no such thing as inflation. So then the Fed was created in 1913. Well, why was the Fed created in 1913? Investors and investing has always been the same, right? Everyone should have three buckets. You have a liquidity bucket that funds your lifestyle, 5 to 15% to pay the bills and pay the rent and travel and food. And that needs to be liquid. It needs to be high quality. It can't have lots of volatility. That's your liquidity bucket. Then up here, you got the 10 to 15% of the get rich bucket. And that's where I would say that's where you're doing the friend's condo deal, the brother-in-law's venture deal, the hot stock tip you got. You're going to lose it all, so keep it small. No, I'm just kidding around. But that's where you put, things that you think have big potential to return lots. And some of them go to zero, but that's okay, because that's where you take your big tail risk. Then 70% is in the stay rich bucket. Well, you say, well, what if I'm not rich yet? Well, then you got to have more in the get rich bucket, plus your income and plus your, you want to get some passive income. So, but that stay rich bucket, 70%, that needs to follow, the endowment model, right? Which is a diversified portfolio of high volatility assets. And the younger you are, the more volatile, right? That are uncorrelated. Like, I believe if you're under 65, it should actually be against the law to own bonds. Like literally, it should be against the law, especially in your 401k, because you can't touch your 401k until you're 71 and a half. So why would you put bonds in there? You should have venture capital and real estate and commodities and Bitcoin and all the most volatile things, because you can't touch it. Bonds are for the liquidity bucket to spend, nothing else. So in the stay rich bucket, you want to have an equity orientation, but equity doesn't mean stocks. It means private equity, real estate equity, commodity equity, stock equity, digital assets, not equity, but digital assets. Bitcoin should be a meaningful piece of that portfolio. Why? Well, because it's the perfect asset.
구독자분들을 위해서 10년 경력 개발자 출신 트레이더와 프롬프트 엔지니어가 같이 만든 알파빗 오토프로 지표 무료 신청을 오픈했습니다. 현재 유료로 팔고 있는 그만큼 가치 있는 지표이지만 구독과 좋아요 해주신 분들에 한해서 선착순 30명만 신청제로 받기로 했습니다. 초보자분들부터 경력이 오래된 트레이더 분들까지 굉장히 큰 도움을 받을 수 있는 지표라 도움이 되실 거라고 자부합니다. 또한 실제로 사용해보고 사용 후기까지 적어주시는 분들 5명을 선별해서 알파빗 오토프로 지표 평생 이용권을 드리려고 합니다. 신청 방법은 하단 더보기란과 고정 댓글에 나와 있으니 많은 신청 부탁드립니다. 구독과 좋아요는 영상 제작에 큰 도움이 됩니다. 성투하시기 바랍니다.